Nigeria's shadow economy of terror, how $1.48 billion in ransom built a state of crime. In Nigeria, the simple act of driving on a highway no longer leads to petty theft. It leads to high-value mass abductions. Over a single terrifying year, analysts estimate Nigerians paid over 2.23 trillion naira, approximately $1.48 billion in ransom, transforming organized crime into a lucrative parallel economy that rivals the nation's biggest industries. This is the story of how Nigeria's insecurity metastasized from an ideology-driven fight in the northeast, Boko Haram, and a resource battle in the Delta, to a nationwide economic enterprise where common armed robbers abandoned small-time sticks-ups to become specialized kidnapping gangs. This explainer details the anatomy of the crisis, from the sophisticated informants who betray their own communities and the lucrative high-stakes negotiation business that entrapped figures like Tukurumamu, to the massive $3.6 billion annual theft of crude oil. It reveals how a criminal shadow state is challenging the very foundations of the Nigerian Republic. From sectarian violence to nationwide criminality, a history of insecurity in Nigeria between 2008 and 2025. The trajectory of insecurity in Nigeria between 2008 and 2025 is not a single linear narrative, but a complex adaptive evolution. It began as two geographically distinct challenges: a resource conflict fight in the south and an ideological insurgency in the north, and metastasized into a multi-front war defined by criminal entrepreneurship, political grievances, and a profound crisis of state legitimacy. This transformation has exacted an unprecedented human and economic toll on the nation. It occurs between 2008 and 2010. The foundation of modern Nigerian insecurity was laid in this brief period, marked by the state reaction to both an old and a newly emerging threat: the radicalization of Boko Haram. The extremist group Jama'atul Ahli Sunnah Lid-Da'awati wal Jihad, known as Boko Haram, was initially a localized religious sect in the northeast. The pivotal moment occurred in July 2009, when the group launched an uprising in Maiduguri, which was brutally suppressed by the Nigerian security forces. The extrajudicial killing of its founder, Muhammad Yusuf, did not defeat the movement. Instead, it radicalized the surviving members. Under the new leadership of Abubakar Shekau, the group transformed into a vicious terrorist organization, abandoning earlier religious police resistance for sophisticated suicide bombings and large-scale attacks, initiating a campaign to overthrow the Nigerian state and establish an Islamic caliphate. The Niger Delta solution and its unintended consequences. Concurrently, the government sought to resolve the long-standing crisis fueled by the Niger Delta militants, who were protesting environmental degradation and demanding resource control via attacks on oil infrastructure and the kidnapping of expatriates. In 2009, the government implemented the Presidential Amnesty Program, offering payment, training, and demobilization to militants who surrendered their arms. The PAP was successful in reducing organized attacks on pipelines, stabilizing oil production, and temporarily restoring peace to the region. However, it fostered a dangerous precedent that armed violence could be monetized, and crucially failed to eliminate the underlying criminal networks, while attacks seized large-scale crude oil theft, bunkering, The illegal tapping of pipelines for siphoning crude persisted and grew, utilizing the same security vacuum and networks established during the military era. Now, the peak of insurgency and new regional front. It happens between 2011 and 2016 in Nigeria. This phase saw the full maturity of Boko Haram's terror campaign and the emergence of two new geographically distinct threats. Boko Haram's reign of terror as Boko Haram escalated its tactics to target symbols of the federal government and the international community. This peaked with the 2011 bombing of the United Nations headquarters in Abuja, the nation's capital, marking Nigeria's first suicide bombing. The group cemented their notoriety internationally with the 2014 mass abduction of over 276 Chibok schoolgirls, demonstrating the state's failure to secure civilian life. The insurgency resulted in the displacement of over 2 million people and massive humanitarian crisis, with the group controlling significant territory in the northeast until a concerted regional military pushback. The farmer had a crisis and the weaponization of wrestling in the north central and northwest region. The long-standing tensions between settled farmers and nomadic Fulani herders over land and grazing routes exploded into communal warfare. This was fueled by demographic pressures, climate change, and most critically, the widespread availability of small arms smuggled from the Sahel, a parallel criminal phenomenon. Cattle rustling emerged as a highly organized armed criminal activity. The nomadic Fulani herders, whose entire livelihood is tied to their cattle, became the primary victims of these armed rustlers. Their communities were raided, their assets stolen, and their families often massacred. Feeling unprotected and dispossessed, many young Fulani men took up arms either in revenge or for protection, thereby providing a ready pool of experienced armed recruits for the emerging bandit groups, creating a devastating circle that drove the conflict. Now, in the southern part of the country, the re-emergence of separatism, IPOP, in the southeast, the indigenous people of Biafra IPOP gained prominence under Nnamdi Kanu, channeling historical grievances and perceived marginalization of the Igbo ethnic group. Initially, their campaign was largely non-violent, characterized by mass protests, rallies, and effective propaganda via radio broadcast and digital media, advocating for the secession of the former eastern region. Then, between 2017 and 2025, Nigeria witnessed nationalization of threat and criminal economy. The current phase is defined by the decentralization and commercialization of insecurity, making threat ubiquitous across Nigeria's 6 geopolitical zones. The banditry epidemic and its funding mechanism take center stage. The dominant threat shifted to armed bandits whose motive was purely economic. Their rise coincided with a profound evolution in criminal modus operandi, armed robbers into specialized kidnapping gangs. For decades, armed robbery, particularly on major highways connecting cities like Lagos, Ibadan, Abuja, and Kaduna, was characterized by criminals stopping vehicles to steal cash and possessions. This form of normal armed robbery has now largely ceased to exist. Criminals realized that the risk to reward ratio was far superior in kidnapping for ransom, instead of netting a few thousand naira from a robbery. Kidnapping for ransom targets the victim's family, yielding potentially millions of naira in ransom payments, with a lower risk of immediate violent state response. Consequently, highway gangs repurpose their arms and organization, making mass kidnappings for ransom, targeting travelers, students, and entire villages. Their core tactic transforming the practice into a multi-million-dollar industry. The scale of the ransom economy. The sheer financial scale of this transition underscores the crisis. The kidnapping business has evolved into a full-scale illicit economic circuit that profoundly distorts the national economy. Estimate from the National Bureau of Statistics (NBS) indicate that Nigerians may have paid up to 2.23 trillion naira, approximately $1.48 billion as of late 2025 in ransom within a single year, while verified payment reported by security analysts are more conservative, in the billions of naira. This multi-trillion naira estimate reflects the staggering total impact of the kidnapping phenomenon, including direct ransom, lost productivity, and the depletion of families' life savings, cementing kidnapping for ransom as a parallel economy that directly competes with and undermines legitimate commerce. The political economy of ransom and its enablers take center stage. The efficiency and persistence of the kidnapping for ransom model are sustained by a network of local actors who have monetized the crisis. The informant network. The success of Bandits is critically dependent on informants who live within the target communities. These individuals, often seen as more dangerous than the bandits themselves, provide crucial intelligence that makes large-scale operations feasible. They supply information on the identity and location of worthy target, the movement of security forces and local vigilantes, and the logistics necessary to sustain the bandits in the bush. Food, fuel, arms, and market access for selling stolen goods. Informants operate on a commission basis, receiving a cut of the ransom, turning local knowledge into profitable criminal enterprise. The lucrative negotiation business itself has become a high-stakes, lucrative businesses that sometimes blurs the line between mediation and crime financing. The involvement of ostensibly neutral parties, whether media figures, clerics, or self-appointed negotiators in the ransom handover process is often monetized. The most high-profile case involves Mamu, a journalist and publisher who negotiated the release of victims from the March 2022 Kaduna-Abuja train attack. Following his involvement, Mamu was arrested and arraigned by the federal government on terrorism and financing charges, accused of leveraging his position to aid the terrorists. Specifically, the government alleged he collected significant funds on behalf of the terrorists, including a total of $420,000 and an additional 21 million naira from various families of the train attack victims, highlighting how individuals profiting from the desperate situation can themselves become key facilitators of the criminal economy.